Welcome back to the Floriani Software Fundamentals video series on FTCU. In this section we're going to be covering the sequence view. The sequence view is located over here on the lower right hand part of your screen, and it takes up about half of the vertical area. So before we get into what it does, let me just tell you what you can do if at some point you need to see more of the sequence view. You can position your cursor kind of right here. It's a little hard to do, to where you get that double line and double headed arrow, and you can actually drag the top of the sequence view up and down to get a little bit more space. The other thing you can do is you can actually hide the box above it, which is the properties box, by coming right here to this properties box icon and clicking it. When you do that, the properties box will temporarily go away and allow you to see more room here in the sequence view, which is sometimes useful if you're working with a complicated design. But in this design it's fairly uncomplicated, so we're going to turn the properties box back on by clicking that icon right there. And let's talk about what happens over here in the sequence view. Now, we've talked about it a little bit in other sections, but basically what we have here is for each thread color change, we have a new item in the sequence view. And you can see this particular design has 4 thread changes. We have peach pearl, cadmium, baby blue, and jet black. So those are our 4 thread colors. And again, each thread color is represented by this top level item right here, and we call it the top level because underneath it are all the various other stitches. And right here you see a little thumbnail of the area of what that color looks like over here. So you can see that, for example, this cadmium area here, this is this wing, and you can see that it kind of looks like this, okay? And then this wing is this one here, and the black is all the outlines and other details. And of course the peach pearl is the body. So that's just a basic view of what it looks like. So before we get into the items that come underneath these top level items, let's take a look at the icons that are over here towards the left. And the first one on top here is this eyeball icon, and that lets us hide this thread color temporarily. So if I click that, and this is, remember, the peach of the body, if I click it, you'll see that all of that thread disappears. Now this is a great way to temporarily maybe select something that's on top of it easily, or not be distracted by that color, or maybe there's a detail that you need to add underneath. And when we get to digitizing, you'll see some examples of why we would hide a thread temporarily. To bring it back, you simply click on the eyeball again, and that brings it back. And it also happens to have selected it, so I'm going to deselect it by clicking off it. And then this lock icon right here, this actually locks it into place. So right now, if I were to select that, I could actually move it around like this. So I'd move all of that peach off. And I'm going to undo that because I don't really want to do that. But if I were to lock it, what happens is that not only does it get deselected, but I can't select it. Okay, so no matter where I click on it, I cannot select that peach. And you see, when I selected that satin by mistake there, it expanded my sequence view out. So now I see all the black items. But since this is locked, even if I select it over here, there's really nothing I can do with it except to unlock it. So let me actually unlock it. And since we accidentally expanded all of these items in the black here, let's talk about that. We mentioned this in another section, but that's what this little icon right here does. This expands and contracts the items underneath. So right now you can see this is a minus sign because this is expanded. If I want to collapse it, I can click it and it turns into a plus and it collapses back. If I have multiple objects open like this or expanded, and I would like to quickly collapse them all, I can right click anywhere in my sequence view and select from that menu that comes up, collapse all. All right, and so that is the basics of the sequence view and how you use it. Now, if I wanted to stitch things out here in a different order, all I have to do is click and drag the items around in my sequence view. So for some reason, for example, if I wanted this black to stitch out first, or instead of, say, this baby blue, I could click and drag it, and in order to get it to stitch above this baby blue, I actually have to drag it one item above that, and then it will fall in underneath it. So I'm going to click and drag it up to the item above where I want it to go, and when I let off, you'll see that it comes back here right on top of it. So that's the way it works. You drag it to the item above where you want it to go, let off the mouse, and it will show up in the right place. Now I really don't want it to stitch out there, so I can simply drag it back down, and there it goes back down into the bottom. So you can see that I drug it down onto the item above where I wanted it to go, which was this one, and it fell in underneath it. If I know I need it to go to a certain place, I can also use my right-click menu to select some options. So for example, if I right-click on this, I can select my move item, and then notice I haven't clicked, I'm just hovering over this, and I have some options here. I can move it to the first. Normally I could also move it to last, but you see it's grayed out, and why is that? Because it's already the last item. I could move it up one item or down one item, and again that is grayed out, and I could go to the previous match or the next match. And you can see that previous match is highlighted, but if I click it, nothing's going to happen, because what previous match does, and I'm going to click off of that so you could see, is previous match takes it takes whatever I have selected, and it tries to merge it into the matching color that is either above or below it. So let me show you how that would work here, and we'll also get a sense of how this works. So if I wanted to stitch out this particular satin path first, I could actually drag it up here to all items, which is the very top, and let off, and it would stitch that item out. And I'm going to collapse all here so you can see everything perfectly. So you can see now, instead of having 4 thread changes, I've added a new one here. Now I really don't want that to stitch there, but I did this as an example, because if I now right click on this, I could click move, and I could go to the next match, which would be the next one down, and it put it next to this one. Okay, so it didn't actually put it in the proper order, but it put it in as close as it could get to the next color. So it put it right up against this color. Now if I want to get it back where it should have been, I don't remember where it came from, so I'm actually going to use my undo button. Again, this is your favorite button in the whole software, so if I undo it, you see it goes back up to the top. I'll undo one more time, and now my design is back stitching out perfectly. So that is some of those controls in the move section. Let's take a look at what else we have here in the right click menu. I've also got the ability to cut and copy. I can delete some stitches, I can group them, I can distribute them, and I can remove some overlap stitches. And we'll talk about all of those later. But let's talk about what's up here at the top. I've got show all, hide other, collapse all, expand all. So we talked about expanding and collapsing. If I do expand all, it's going to expand everything, and the opposite of that, of course, is collapse all. But let's talk about show all and hide other. All right, so let's say I just wanted to work with this peach. I could come in here and I could select all of these eyeballs to hide everything else, but I have an easier way to do that, and that's what hide other is all about. So if I right click on this and I say hide other, it's going to hide everything except the peach, and if I click off it, you'll see I just have those peach fill stitches. And the way to get all these back is with a show all. So if I click show all, everything comes back. So that's the right click items within your sequence view. And to select items in the sequence view, obviously you click on them. When we talked about selecting, we also talked about the fact that if you wanted to select multiple items, you could control click on them. So if I want to select the peach and the black, I could hold down control and click that, and it would get those two. If I wanted to select everything within a range, I could click on the first item, and if I want to select everything between here and here, I could shift click this one. I'm holding down shift and clicking, and it selects the first one and the one I shift clicked on and everything in between. Now, one more thing I want to show you are these two boxes up here, and these are our sequence view filters, and they allow us to filter what we see based on either segments or colors. So for example, if I click off of everything so I can see everything, I can click this down arrow and I can see all my stitches, I can see all my runs, my fills, or my satin paths. Now, this stitches doesn't mean what you think it means. It means elements that are not a run, a fill, or a satin, just something that is manual stitches, all right? So if I were to just select the satins, if I click that, you will see here that I'm only seeing the satin paths, all right, in my objects. If I were to select runs, okay, I would just see all of the run stitches. So if I want to eliminate all those runs for some reason, I could just show all my runs, select them all, and easily delete them or change their thread color or whatever I need to do with them. So I'm going to come back here and select all segments again because let me collapse everything. And if I do the colors, this knows what colors are in my design. And for example, if I just wanted to see the blacks, I could just see the blacks. So this is very, very powerful for sorting out the various segments that you want to work with. I'll go back to all colors. And so that's the basics of your sequence view. Now, one more little tip about the sequence view before we're done, and that is sometimes you get into a situation where you see that you have the same color here and here, and they're separated out as different objects, and we actually want them to all be the same. Sometimes when this happens, your machine will actually stop and make you start stitching again, even though the thread color didn't change, because the machine is seeing this as a separate thread color. And if you understand what's going on inside the actual stitch format, what that means is that there's a stop in between here and here, which is causing the machine to actually stop and ask for new thread, and it's actually also causing the software to think that there's a different new thread color here. So how do we get these merged back together? Now, this little lock stitch was originally right here, but I drug it out so I could show you this before I started recording. Now, there's two ways to get these back together. One is in the sequence view. If you actually click on the item below the item where you want to merge these together, so you don't click on this one, but you click on this one, and you right click on it. So you can either click and right click or just right click. You'll see I have something here called remove stop. So that takes that color stop out, and if I do that, you'll see that they all go back together as one color again. Now I'm actually going to undo that because I'm going to show you the other way to do it, and that gets into manipulating the thread, and we haven't talked about it yet, but it's coming up soon. This is our thread palette down here of the thread colors that are in our design. So I have these four colors are the same as these four colors here, and the numbers here correspond to the numbers in the sequence view. So one thing I can do is I can click this one, and I can click with holding down Control this one, so I've got all the black selected, and I can reassign it to that black. So if I click this, that will put it all back together as one color. So those are two different ways that you can merge the two colors back together. One is with remove stop in the sequence view, and the other is to use this thread reallocation trick.